The sky cracked open like old leather splitting in a fist, and rain came down in crooked sheets. Thunder galloped across the plains not far from where a crooked trail forked between the hills of Bristleback and the long reach of Dead Dog Ridge. There in the eye of the storm a wagon lay overturned. One wheel spun hopelessly in the mud, creaking like an old woman's knee. The lantern had shattered glass and flames snuffed under hoof and wheel. A woman in black velvet knelt beside the wreckage, soaked to her bones, sobbing hard enough to shake her shoulders. One horse dead, the other still tangled in its harness, eyes rolling white from the smell of blood and lightning. She tried to lift the body lying face down in the sludge, but the weight was too much. "Help," she whispered, though no one could hear her. Then a silhouette emerged through the curtain of rain, a man on horseback, wide-brimmed hat, dripping rifle sheathed against the saddle. His horse paused on the edge of the trail, ears flicking. The rider looked like a statue unmoved by the storm, the woman or the brokenness laid before him. She turned her head, one eye swollen with tears and mud, and saw him. "Please," she said again, louder now, voice shaking. The man dismounted, slowly, purposefully. He said nothing. Walked past her to the body in the mud, turned it over with a boot. The face was bloodied, but dead, clear eyes, open mouth slack. The man looked back at her. She shivered. Then he spoke. "Get up. Ain't safe to kneel that long in a place like this." The wind howled like a wolf. She didn't move. But his hand was already reaching down. Eli Brogan hadn't spoken to another soul in 3 winters. Not since the morning the sheriff rode out to his ranch and handed him a charred belt buckle, his brother's. That was the day Eli stopped riding into town, stopped attending Sunday service, stopped answering letters. The only voice left in his life was the wind whispering through split fences and the creak of the barn door never quite hanging right on its hinges. Folks around Dead Dog Ridge said Eli was just another ghost with calloused hands and smoke behind his eyes. They weren't wrong. His ranch sat low in the valley, flanked by cottonwoods and dry riverstone. The house was plain pine with half its porch boards replaced by mismatched scraps from the old church barn. He lived with a single dog, Patch, half deaf and mostly blind, and the silence of memory. There was a letter, too, burned around the edges, kept folded tight inside an empty tobacco tin in the corner of the barn's loft. He never read it, not all the way. Just the first line, "Eli, I'm sorry I didn't tell you about the deal." The fire had taken everything: barn cattle and his younger brother Sam. Rumor claimed Sam was into bad business, gambling debts, land theft. One rumor said he'd been running whiskey through the native lands and that Eli knew. But Eli never answered, never explained. He only rebuilt the barn, planted fresh fence posts, and turned away anyone who dared ask. He woke before dawn each day, milked the goat, split wood with a heavy axe, mended the roof when needed. The ranch didn't thrive, but it lived. That was enough. Every time a rider passed on the road below, Eli watched from behind the curtain, not moving a muscle, just in case. That day, though, when he saw the wagon turned over in the storm, saw the woman in black velvet, eyes too wide and hands too raw, something cracked. Not his face, not yet, but something under the ribs. He'd ridden out with no intention but to pass by, yet the image pulled him off his horse. By the time the woman was seated by his hearth, shaking in a blanket, Eli had already brought her bags inside, lit a fire, and tied up the surviving horse. He hadn't asked her name. She hadn't offered it. She just sat staring at the flames like they spoke a language she couldn't translate anymore. Eli stood across the room, arms folded, silhouette cast against the back wall. "Man in the mud was your husband?" he asked, low and even. She nodded once, then again. "We were headed to Copper Hollow," she whispered. "He wanted to buy a deed. Start over." Eli didn't reply. He watched her hands. They trembled. Mud caked beneath her nails. One wrist bore a red mark too clean to be an accident, too old to be from tonight. "You can sleep in the loft. Dog won't bother you." She looked up at him, face unreadable. "You don't even know my name." "No," he said, and turned away. "Don't need to." Outside, thunder rolled away into the hills, but the wind hadn't died. Not yet. Inside, the fire snapped sharply. and the woman whose name he did not ask reached a hand into her coat pocket and clutched something tightly. A small flat object. She didn't let go until morning. The morning was thin and pale like paper held to candlelight. A mist clung low to the earth, muffling hoofbeats and birdsong alike. Eli moved through his chores with wordless purpose, feeding the hens, checking the well pump, hauling logs into a neat stack near the porch. The woman slept late in the hayloft, curled beneath an old quilt he hadn't unfolded in years. When she finally came down, her face looked clearer, but her eyes were still rimmed in bruised dark shadows. She wore a simple dress now, one Eli's mother had stitched decades ago and left behind in a cedar chest. It hung loose on her shoulders, but it was dry. She stepped barefoot into the kitchen and stood quiet like a guest in a stranger's memory. The kettle whistled softly. Eli poured 2 cups and slid one across the table without looking at her. She sipped in silence. Then she spoke. "My name's Clara." Eli nodded. "Eli Brogan." She watched him as if tasting the name. "Heard of you. Folks in town say you don't talk to ghosts or God." He shrugged. "Both been quiet lately." A pause stretched long between them, then snapped. "I buried him," she said, eyes downcast. "Your shovel, back behind the barn." Her voice thinned. "Didn't know what else to do." He stared at her, unreadable. "You dig deep best I could." He nodded again. That was enough. By mid-afternoon, Clara had cleaned the dishes, fed the chickens, and patched a rip in Eli's spare shirt. She moved like someone trying not to disappear, graceful but wary, like a deer with a wound it doesn't yet feel. Eli noticed but said nothing. He was a man who knew when to leave silence alone. That evening, as the sun fell amber over the hills, she sat on the porch steps watching a hawk circle above the ridge. "He wasn't always cruel," she said softly. "James, my husband. He used to whistle while he rode. Bought me a velvet coat one winter. Then things changed." Eli stood a few feet away, chewing a stalk of grass. He didn't ask what changed, but she answered anyway. "Money. Men with dark hats and darker promises. He made deals. I kept quiet. One day I stopped knowing the man in our bed." Eli exhaled slow, the kind of breath that carried 1,000 things not said. She turned toward him. "I'm not here to make you pity me, I just—" She hesitated, then said it plain. "Thank you for not leaving me there." Eli looked at her long and level. "Wasn't mercy," he said. "Just didn't want buzzards near my trail." She smiled at that, the first time her face softened since arriving. "Well," she said, rising, "then I guess I owe buzzards my thanks." They shared a silence. But this one didn't sting. Night fell cooler. Stars blinked in one by one. Clara brought out 2 tin bowls of beans, and they ate side by side on the porch. Neither spoke of tomorrow. Neither asked where the road would go. Inside the barn, the letter in the tobacco tin remained untouched, but the dog patch lay curled beneath Clara's hanging coat tail, thumping softly in sleep. In the distance, a rider dismounted near a ridge. He crouched, studying wagon tracks in the dirt, smiled to himself, then mounted again and disappeared into the dusk. 3 days passed like smoke curling from a dying fire, quiet, watchful, uneasy. Clara stayed in the loft but moved like she belonged, sweeping the porch, boiling herbs for Eli's stiff hands, even talking to the goats like they were neighbors. She didn't press him with questions, and he didn't ask about her bruises. A fragile rhythm formed, shaped by silence and small tasks. But underneath it all, Eli could feel the tremble in the ground before the storm. The wind carried a strange smell: saddle oil, cigar smoke, old sweat and blood. The kind that never left once it soaked in. It was the dog that knew first. Patch growled at nothing. Eyes blind, but nose sharp, ears twitching. Eli stood at the window, cup in hand, watching the distant trail from the hills. Just before sundown, 5 riders came into view, dark coats, wide hats, moving as one. They didn't ride like cowboys. They rode like wolves. Clara stood behind him, silent, until she saw them. Her voice was thin. "Bramblehorn riders." Eli turned. "Who?" She stepped back from the window. "Bounty gang. Paid mercenaries. They do the kind of work lawmen won't. Led by a man named Quinn Daggart. He's the reason we ran." Eli looked again. The lead rider had a long red duster and a crow feather band tied to his rifle. His horse was jet-black hooves clapping sharp on the dry trail. "What's he want with you?" Clara's hands shook. "Not me. James, my husband, made a deal. With Quinn. Gold, transport, something bad. I don't know the details, but when James tried to walk away, Quinn came for him. I saw what they did." Eli said nothing, but his eyes sharpened. The riders reached the edge of the property by nightfall. They didn't dismount, just sat there watching. Then one rode forward, a thin man with a stitched-up lip and a lantern. He held it high. "Ho there, ranch house." Eli stepped out onto the porch, shotgun in one hand, cup of coffee in the other. "You're on private land." The man grinned. "Ain't that just a fence in the wind? We're looking for a woman. Name's Clara Holt. Went missing after her husband died up Copper Hollow Way." "You seen her?" Eli sipped. "Name doesn't ring." The thin man tipped his hat. "That's so. Well, if she turns up, there's a bounty on her. Real generous one. She ran off with coin that don't belong to her." Eli didn't blink. "This a law matter. Let's call it freelance justice." Behind the man, Quinn Daggett dismounted. Tall, lean face like cured leather, nose bent in the middle like it had been broken twice. He wore twin revolvers, silver-etched grips. His eyes found Eli held him like nails into wood. "Nice piece of land," he said. "Bit too nice for a ghost like you." Eli didn't answer. "We'll camp up on the ridge tonight," Quinn said. "If you change your mind about anything, ride on up." They turned and rode out back into the dusk. But Eli knew they hadn't gone far. That night Clara didn't eat. She sat by the hearth staring into flame. Eli loaded his rifles, laid out shells, checked the hinges on the storm cellar. The dog wouldn't settle. Restless, sensing the air. "They'll come," Clara said. Eli nodded. "I know. I can leave." "No." She looked at him, eyes wide. "You don't owe me anything." He looked back, face carved in stone. "Buzzards ain't getting another meal." He showed her the hidden latch to the storm cellar beneath the pantry, reinforced during a harsh winter long ago. "You stay down there, no matter what you hear." "What about you?" Eli looked toward the barn. "I've buried too many things quiet. If they come, I'll speak loud." The sky was moonless. Shadows moved like smoke. By midnight, the dog barked once, then whimpered. Eli moved to the window, rifle ready. A spark flared near the barn, then fire. The roof lit up fast, old timber dry as kindling. Flames leapt orange and furious. A diversion. Eli ran outside. Shots cracked. Dirt kicked up near his feet. He dove behind a trough, saw 3 shadows moving from the east, coming fast. He fired twice. One dropped. Another yelled. Eli rolled, took cover by the well. Shot again. Inside, Clara opened the cellar, saw fire flickering through the cracks. She didn't run. She grabbed the shotgun Eli had left by the door. Outside, Eli took a bullet in the shoulder, spun, gritted his teeth, fell to a knee. Quinn stepped into view, pistol aimed. Should have taken the offer, ghost man. Then boom! A shotgun blast tore through the dark. Quinn stumbled, shoulder bleeding. Clara stood in the doorway, eyes blazing, dress soaked in sweat and smoke. "You don't get to bury him." Quinn turned, raised his pistol. Eli fired from the ground. Quinn dropped. Silence fell like ash. The barn roared behind them. But the night had gone quiet. The barn burned until only ribs of black timber stood like charred fingers clawing the night sky. Smoke poured into the stars, thick with the smell of oil hay and scorched blood. Eli slumped against the well-breathed, shallow shoulder, bleeding down his shirt like a second shadow. Clara knelt beside him, hands pressed to the wound, her jaw tight with fear and resolve. The heat from the flames lit half her face orange, the other half swallowed in darkness. "Bullets in," she said, voice steady but thin. "Not clean. We need to get it out." Eli grunted, eyes flickering. "You any good with a knife?" She swallowed. "No." He closed his eyes for a beat. "Try anyway." They dragged him inside, Clara bracing his weight with both arms. The floorboards groaned beneath their steps. Patch followed, limping from a graze across his flank, but alive. Clara laid Eli on the table, tore the shirt with shaking hands, and set to work with a paring knife and bottle of whiskey. The bullet came out small and blackened slick with blood. She dropped it into a tin cup. Eli didn't scream, but he bit down on a strip of leather hard enough to split it. She stitched him with thick thread in the last of the moonlight. Outside, 2 bodies lay near the barn. Quinn Daggart was not among them. Eli opened his eyes before dawn. Clara sat on the floor back against the wall, shotgun across her lap. Her eyes were open. She hadn't slept. "They'll come back," she said. He nodded weakly. "Unless he's dead." "You think he is?" Eli stared at the ceiling. "Men like that don't die easy." The sun rose behind smoke-gray clouds. The ranch looked worse for wear, fence torn near the west pasture, 1 goat missing the barn, little more than a skeleton. But the storm cellar stood untouched. The porch held bullet holes but no blood. Clara moved like a ghost, eyes scanning the ridge. By midday, the riders returned, 3 this time. Quinn among them, his arm in a sling, face pale but fire-eyed. He stood at the edge of the trail and shouted, "You cost me good men, Brogan. And for what? Some widow with lies behind her tears." Eli stood on the porch, wrapped in a blanket rifle, resting on the rail. "Wasn't for her," he said, "was for peace. And you didn't bring it." Quinn sneered. "That gold was mine. Her man took it. She helped him." Clara stepped out beside Eli, gun in hand. "My husband took that gold from miners who never saw a lawman," she said. "And you helped him." Quinn laughed. "He owed me." Then he turned coward. "So I came collecting." Eli raised the rifle slightly. "You done talking?" Quinn narrowed his eyes. "You ain't gonna shoot me in daylight, Brogan. Not with the law watching the valley now." "Sheriff's got a long memory?" Eli didn't blink. "Then go tell him what you saw. And if you step 1 inch closer, I'll show him what I left in my field." Quinn stared long and hard. Then he spat, turned, and rode off with the others. Clara exhaled. "You think he'll be back tonight?" Eli shook his head. "He'll wait. Heal up. Circle back with more." "So what do we do?" He turned to her, eyes clear despite the wound. "We finish it before he gets the chance." That night they buried the 2 men near the old dry well. Clara carved a cross into a plank of wood for each. "Not for them," she said. "For the story someone else might tell." Inside, Eli cleaned his rifle one last time. He wrapped his shoulder with fresh cloth. His hands shook less now. The pain was a fire in the distance, burning, but not here. Clara sat beside the fire, holding the flat object from her coat. She hadn't shown it to him yet. He looked at her, eyes narrowed. "What is it?" She held it out. A locket. Inside, 2 faces. One was hers, the other his brother. Eli stared, didn't move, didn't speak. Clara's voice trembled. "I didn't know. Not until I saw your name. He said his partner was a rancher. Quiet, honest. He said he left him behind." Eli reached for the tobacco tin, opened it, pulled out the burnt letter. Clara read over his shoulder. Her lips moved silently. "Eli, I'm sorry I didn't tell you about the deal. I was scared. They said they'd come for me if I backed out. I had to keep you out of it. If I don't come back, no, I tried to make it right." Eli closed his eyes. The fire crackled. The locket sat between them, heavy as judgment. "You were married to my brother," he said flatly. Clara nodded. "I didn't know who you were until I saw the barn. The name on the well. You said your husband was James. That's the name he gave the world after he ran." Eli looked at the fire, then at her. "So who killed him?" She met his gaze. "I did." A pause, stretched, brittle as glass. "He tried to run again," she whispered. "Tried to take the gold and leave me behind. Said Quinn would clean up after him. I didn't let him." Eli stood slowly, walked to the door, stared into the night. "You buried him behind my barn." She came up behind him. "I didn't plan for it to end like that. No one ever does." He turned. "But now it has to end right." She nodded. "Then let's finish it." The wind blew cool across the porch. Somewhere far off, a coyote howled. In the hills, Quinn watched through a spyglass, teeth-clenched, jaw set. His time would come. One more night, one more shot. But so would theirs. The sky turned to bruised gold the next morning, streaked with the kind of light that feels like a warning. Eli saddled his horse before sunrise, arm bandaged, tight rifle tied across his back. Clara stood at the edge of the porch, wrapped in a brown wool coat, her fingers clutching the locket so hard the chain bit into her skin. The truth between them sat like a crack in dry earth, too deep to cross cleanly, too wide to pretend it wasn't there. "You don't have to ride with me," Eli said. Clara didn't move. "I put him in the ground. I'll face what's coming out of it." They rode west down into the gulch where the creek ran shallow and the old mine trails curled between canyon walls. That's where Quinn had gone to heal. Eli knew it without doubt. Same place Sam had once taken him to hide after a card game gone bad. They used to call it Gray Dog Hollow. Now it was where ghosts went to reload. They rode in silence. 1 hour, then 2. Finally, they reached the ridge. Quinn stood waiting, alone this time. The others were gone, scattered or buried. He leaned against a pine stump, one arm in a sling, the other holding a flask. "Well," he said, voice rough as gravel, "ain't this a family reunion?" Eli dismounted. Clara did not. "You lied," Eli said. "About the bounty. About her?" Quinn smiled without mirth. "Did I, or did I just know more than you wanted to?" He looked at Clara. "You never told him what your husband really was. Not just a thief, not just a coward." Clara's voice was low, tight. "I told him everything." "No," Quinn said, stepping closer. "You didn't tell him your husband helped start the fire that killed his brother's cattle. That he torched the Brogan barn to scare Sam into running with the gold." Eli froze. What? Clara looked at him, eyes wide. "I didn't know Quinn's lying." Quinn laughed. "He's not lying," said a new voice. From behind a boulder, a man stepped out, bent, scarred, left hand missing 2 fingers. Eli knew that face. "Ralph Cutter," he said. "You rode with Sam. You set fire to the barn." Ralph nodded slowly. "We needed a distraction. Sam didn't want to do it, but James, your brother, he said it was the only way. Said you'd forgive him." Eli's jaw clenched. "He died in that fire." Ralph lowered his eyes. "And James never forgave himself. Tried to quit the gang. Quinn wouldn't let him." Clara slid from the saddle boots, crunching gravel. "I didn't know," she said to Eli. "I swear. He told me he left that life behind, that he was running from it." Eli looked from Ralph to Quinn to Clara. His hand trembled not from pain, but from the weight of it all. "You could have told me," he said, eyes on her. "You knew who I was. I didn't want to make you hate me," she said. "Or him." Eli closed his eyes, heart pounding like a drum. Too late for that. A long silence. Then Quinn pulled his revolver. "I've heard enough guilt for one day." But Clara stepped forward, eyes locked on Quinn. "I'm the one you want. You," he said. "You're nothing but leftover grief. I killed James. I took what you think is yours, so take it." She pulled the locket from her neck, held it out. Quinn stared at it, didn't move. Then Eli fired. The shot struck Quinn in the thigh. He dropped, howling. Eli stepped forward, rifle lowered now. "You're done, Daggert. Ride or bleed, but you don't get another piece of this story." Ralph knelt beside Quinn, shaking his head. "Should have let it go, boss." Quinn cursed through clenched teeth. "She'll always be a liar." Eli looked at Clara. "Maybe. But she stayed when she didn't have to." He turned away. "That counts more than truth some days." Clara stared at the locket, the faces inside. "I married a man who carried fire in his pockets," she said, "and buried him behind the only good man he ever betrayed." She dropped the locket into the dust. Quinn tried to grab it. Clara crushed it beneath her heel. No one stopped her. The ride back was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm has spent itself and left the world hollowed out and damp. The creek ran slow beside them, whispering over rocks like it too was tired of carrying secrets. Eli's shoulder throbbed with each jolt of the saddle, but he kept his back straight, eyes on the trail. Clara rode behind him, not speaking, the wind teasing strands of her hair loose beneath her hat. Neither one looked back. When they reached the ranch, the smoke from the barn had long since faded, leaving behind a skeleton of beams and scorched dirt. The wind had scattered ash across the porch, the steps, the dog's empty bowl. Eli dismounted and limped to the well, poured himself a ladle of water and drank slow. Clara stood in the doorway watching. She stepped into the house and came out moments later with the tobacco tin. Without a word, she handed it to him. Eli opened it. The letter still sat inside, browned and brittle. He read the whole thing this time. Eli, I never meant for it to go this way. I took a deal I didn't understand and tried to keep you safe by leaving you behind. If I don't make it out, I just want you to know you were always the better man. And I'm sorry for every day I didn't say it. Eli closed the tin, walked to the edge of the pasture. Clara followed at a distance, boots soft in the dirt. He reached the oldest fence post, the one his brother had helped drive into the ground all those years ago. The post was weathered gray, chipped at the edges. Eli took off his hat, hung it gently on the post. Then he struck a match. The letter caught fast fire, climbing it like it was hungry. He dropped it into a patch of dry grass, watched it burn to nothing, no words left to carry. Clara stepped up beside him. That was your last letter from him. He nodded. She looked away, voice low. I'm sorry I brought this here. Eli didn't answer, but after a moment he said, You're not what he was. She turned to him, surprised. No. He shook his head. You stayed. You didn't run from the fire. They stood together a long time, watching the sun tip toward the western ridge. A breeze came soft and cool, scattering ashes across the field like snow that would never melt. Patch limped up beside them, tongue lolling, and lay down in the dust. Clara reached to scratch behind his ears. The world didn't change. The past didn't rewrite itself. But something shifted, like a gate opening somewhere far down the trail. Later that night, Eli poured 2 mugs of coffee, sat on the porch beside Clara as stars blinked on above the dark hills. No one spoke. No one had to. At the fence post, his brother's hat stirred in the wind, holding shape, holding memory. And behind them, where fire had eaten everything, new ash settled soft across the soil, rich and black and waiting. One season later, grass grew where the barn once stood, wild and tall. The soil bore vegetables again. People passing by whispered of a widow who walked with a limp rancher, her hand in his. Of a fence post that held no barbed wire, only an old hat and the memory of a man who once lost everything, then found peace, not in revenge, but in something quieter. Forgiveness. Next time you ride through, watch for the hat. And if the wind's just right, you might hear the porch creak and the dog bark, once soft as an ember in dusk. Subscribe for more stories from the West.